Good afternoon. Welcome to the August 25th, 2021 City Council Law and Regulation Committee. The meeting may be viewed on Comcast Channel 14, Consolidated Communication Channel 73, AT&T UVerse. City Council meetings are also video streamed live on the city's website at roseville.ca.us/watch and roseville.ca.us/agenda in the city's YouTube channel, youtube.com/cityofroseville.ca. Members of the public may offer public comment by phone by dialing 916-774-5353, and we won't give out somebody else's number like we did at the city council meeting recently. So we'll have a silent roll call. Is that acceptable? And boy, Mr. Walensky, you're getting close to the end of the session, right?
Yes, sir.
Halfway through the two-year session. So we'll call a roll to order, and Deputy City Manager Scheid, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. It is Deputy City Manager, right? Did I get the title right? You're all important to me. You're all important to the community and everything else. So this is the moment in the agenda where those who would like to comment on non-agenda items have an opportunity. Do we have any members of the audience who want to comment on non-agenda items? And do we have a phone?
We have a phone.
916-774-5353. We'll go a couple of minutes. No, I mean a couple of seconds now. And not hearing the phone ring, we will start with our regular business, starting with agenda item 5.1. Amber Blix giving us an electric department priority legislation update for August of 2021. Hello, Amber.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Hadeschelt, Councilmember Mendoza.
Wait, I gotta, you got Hadeschelt, okay?
Mendonça, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was struggling with the mask takeoff and all of that. It kind of came out wrong.
You get more points for getting that one right.
All right. So first, we're going to start off for our electric department priority legislation with an update of some of the key dates that were upcoming as part of the legislative calendar wraps itself up. So on August 16th, the legislature reconvened from summer recess, and August 27th marks the last day for fiscal committees to meet and report bills. That is actually happening tomorrow, where the appropriations committees will work on their suspense files. September 3rd is the last day to amend bills on the floor, with September 10th being the last day of session, and October 10th as the last day for the governor to sign and veto bills. Some of the topics that I plan to talk about today are some regulatory items, including going into a deeper dive of the California Arrearage payment program. I know we discussed that at our last meeting from a high-level perspective, but kind of wanted to give you guys some more details about how that program is being implemented now. And then shouldn't say the governor's executive order, but the governor's proclamation of a state of emergency there. It's not actually an executive order. And then the federal legislation, which has been getting a lot of attention, which is U.S. H.R. 3684, the Invest in America Act. So those are the topics that we'll cover today. Starting with the California Arrearage Payment Program, or the CAPP program. This will be administered by the California Department of Community Services and Development. It applies to arrears accumulated from March 4th, 2020 to June 15th, 2021, which were the result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was the result of legislation that we discussed last time, but just to highlight it again, AB 135 defines past due bills as bills that are 60 days or more past due, includes inactive and active accounts, and includes customer accounts with payment plans and payment plan arrangements. Here's some high-level overview of implementation. There'll be 4 phases. Right now we're on phase 1, and this will be where we quantify the total energy arrearages statewide, so CSD can kind of get an overview of total arrearages through all the utilities in California. Phase 2 will be where we submit our CAPP application on behalf of residential and commercial customers eligible for CAPP assistance. Phase 3 will be to apply the CAPP benefits directly to the eligible customer accounts in an order of priority that we'll go over a little bit later. And then phase 4 is really the reporting phase and the confirmation of CAPP benefits and their delivery to our customers. So right now, as I mentioned, we're in phase 1, which is the utility survey process, and this was released on August 2nd. And we, in order to participate in the program, we need to return the survey responses to CSD by September 9th. The report said September 1st, but they actually just gave us an extra 8 days to respond because there's been some additional implementation details that CSD has been providing us along the way. And this is really used to develop our individual utility share of the funds. And we have to complete the survey and the application to receive an allocation. Phase 2, as I mentioned, will be the application process, which will be released on October 4th. We will have a 60-day window to apply, which puts us at December 6th, and there's no grace period. And our utility director or their designee will need to certify the application, offer agreement on CAPP application benefit delivery, reporting, and audit review requirements. Phase 3, so data needed for the application will be total amount of customer arrearages incurred, account numbers and corresponding past due balances, other supporting documentation as requested. It's very important that we ensure the data is complete and verifiable because incomplete applications will be returned to the utility for corrections. Now on to phase 3, and this is really where we get the awards and the utility begins disbursement. So CSD will disperse the funds within 30 days after completing review and approval of our application, but no later than January 31st, 2022. And they'll be processing these on a rolling basis because the funds will kind of already be determined for each utility as part of the earlier phases. And then within 60 days of receiving CAPP funds, we as the utility will need to issue assistance to our customers in the form of bill credits. And we must include a statement that the credits are the result of California's CAPP funding program. So now onto the prioritization of fund disbursement. This applies within the billing period that I mentioned earlier, the March 4th, 2020 to June 15th, 2021 dates. So first priority is active residential customers with past due balances that might be subject to service disconnections. Second priority is active residential customers with past due balances. Third is inactive residential accounts. And then fourth is commercial customers with past due balances. And that is the order of priority.
What, can I?
Sure.
Can we go over that again? Can we go? Yeah. Active residential past due balances that might be so. Oh, the key thing here is service disconnections there. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And there might not be a huge difference between 1 and 2. That's just how they define it in the legislation. And then also some requirements in terms of us accepting the funds. We cannot disconnect recipients for 90 days after the benefit is applied. If there's a remaining balance, we need to notify the customer of extended payment plans and options where late fees and penalties are waived. We cannot disconnect while the customer is current on a repayment plan and cannot disconnect while CSD reviews and approves the application. There's also some language in there about waiving late fees and accrued interest for customers that are awarded benefits. And I'll just say that, Roseville has kind of concluded our process on the getting our folks on payment plans as a result of the pandemic and kind of reinstituting the disconnections. And this has gone very well, so we don't see any of these restrictions being a problem for us. Next slide. And then phase 4 is really all about reporting. So CSD will perform a review of CAPP allocation expenditures. Within 6 months of receiving funds, the utility will provide CSD with the report of the total funds dispersed and a schedule of accounts that received CAPP assistance. And then additional reporting and auditing may be requested as needed. And any funds that are not applied will be returned to CSD. So here's a quick timeline recap. I would just say that during the legislative process on this, the goal was kind of to get the money out the door quickly. This is a quick process from the time that the legislation was introduced to the time that we're getting it out. But as you can see, it is still several months from the time that this process is being initiated. So July 19th was the first program notice that was released. August 2nd is when the utility survey was released. September 9th is when our responses are due, and we're working on those now. October 4th is when CAPP funding applications will be released. December 6th is when our applications are due to CSD. January 31st of 2022 is when the funds will be dispersed by CSD, the utility, and then we'll have 60 days following that to kind of get that money out to the customers. And then some of the ongoing engagement, we continue to have regular communication from CSD as the program rolls out. There's already been a few tweaks to the program as this process has evolved, so we've been watching that closely. Last Friday, we actually received a frequently asked questions update that was released, so we've reviewed that. We're participating in weekly trade group meetings to kind of stay on top of any outstanding questions or issues that have been coming up. And one thing that's important, I think, for this group is that likely additional approvals will be needed to receive the CAPP funds, and so you'll likely be seeing a council communication on that in the coming months. So, along with the CAPP, which has been a major program that we've been involved with from legislative introduction to implementation, also recently a big The big topic that we've been following is this proclamation, the emergency proclamation that the governor issued on July 30th of 2021. And this really looked at demand and supply side measures to mitigate capacity and energy shortages that the state is seeing potentially in the near future. On the demand side, what this proclamation called for was incentives for large users to reduce electric demand when an extreme heat event or a loss of transmission or both would occur. And we looked at this part of the proclamation, and it really is meant to apply to large utilities. So I think in the POU community, it would apply to folks like Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and potentially SMUD, really utilities that already have processes in place that could quickly implement kind of a program like this. So these demand kind of incentives are something that we're looking at for the future, but not something that we're participating in at this time. On the supply side, this is really looking at new contracts to expand energy supply and storage. And the purpose was to really rapidly add generation to the grid in the near term. And Roseville has been working to implement additional supply side resources at the REP, Roseville Energy Park, in collaboration with the California Department of Water Resources. And this was the subject of a recent council meeting that occurred last Monday, where the council approved these actions. So just wanted to kind of provide some background and details for the genesis of that.
Can I ask you a question there?
Sure.
Somebody asked me, why is the California Department of Water Resources involved in electricity? I think I gave them the right answer. But if you want to tag team with our water utilities director on the answer to that question, why is DWR the lead on an electric generation?
So my understanding is that they use a lot of electricity for pumping, and they have a lot of needs on the electricity side actually to have the water resources delivered where they need to be. There may be some additional reasons why that my colleagues may be able to provide, but I think that's high level. Really, they've been involved with it.
Rochambeau, I thought it had to do with the fact that for most of the month of June, there were bypass flows that didn't generate electricity.
Yeah, I
So
think
they could keep cold water in storage.
Yeah, so I will add that, yes, the hydropower issue is a problem right now because many of the reservoirs are not operating either at any capacity or near their full capacity. So that's causing a problem on both the electricity side and on the water side. But I will say that DWR is a large consumer of power too, I believe.
Mr. Bigley.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what Amber said. I think it's really kind of an intersection of multiple factors. So I think, currently in terms of just hydro in general, as Amber had indicated, it's a challenge. Also recently, the Hyatt power plant over at Orville Reservoir was essentially taken offline just because of water levels. And I understand that's quite a significant part of the energy production within the state of California. I think I read it was roughly about 15%. So there's a lot of just sort of challenging circumstances going on with respect to the intersection between water supply, reservoirs, and how the state can actually produce the amount of energy it needs to meet all the demands. And a significant user of energy in the state of California, of course, is basically pumping water up over the Tehachapi to serve communities in Southern California. So they've got a lot of demands, and I think they're probably doing what they need to do to ensure there's the energy to keep things moving forward, basically.
Thanks. It's an integrated system, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think it speaks to the great collaboration between this team on the energy and the water side, because as we can see in this situation, it's really a valuable resource to have here.
Yeah. No, thanks for letting me jump in there.
So, and then my final slide is regarding U.S. H.R. 3684, which is the Invest in America Act. And this has really become the vehicle for the Senate's bipartisan infrastructure bill that is being known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The legislation totals over $1 trillion and includes investments in $73 billion in investments for electrical grid activities, clean energy technology, and key technologies like carbon capture, hydrogen, and energy efficiency. $7.5 billion for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, $65 billion for broadband expansion activities. And those are mainly the stuff that we're tracking on the energy side. And we've been tracking this through our trade partners, especially the American Public Power Association. That last bullet, which says the timing correlation of infrastructure and the reconciliation package are still uncertain, I would say it's a very fluid process, but we actually did get a little bit of clarity on this yesterday. Yesterday, the House passed the budget resolution that starts the process for putting the pieces of the $3.5 trillion human infrastructure process together. And the expectation is that this other bill will pass the House before the Senate passed infrastructure bill, which is slated for a vote on September 27th. So we think this is very encouraging news, but I will just note that it's a very fluid process. The negotiations are ongoing, and the timing is still uncertain of that because of all the negotiations that are in play. But there was, like I said, the budget resolution that was passed yesterday that kind of starts this process rolling a little bit more now. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Thank you for your presentation. I have no questions.
So there's so many dates in which folks have, to settle up their accounts. And I was looking at your staff report. For electric, when is it September 1st or September 30th, in which there's a grace period, statewide for the emergency order? Or has that date already passed?
So, I'm sorry, what emergency order, which one are you talking about for the?
With respect to electric, right? If you're not able to pay your bill, right? The state intervened and said, we're going to, hang on, we'll, if you can pay what you can pay. But there's a date in which, wasn't there a date in which that ended?
Yeah, so I think on the electric side, so publicly owned utilities were not under the same requirements as the investor-owned utilities, who did have certain dates and times certain where they couldn't disconnect for non-payment, for example. Roseville wasn't under those same obligations, and so we actually already started we had many communication processes for several months to work with our customers and get them on appropriate payment plans. And we're really wrapping up that process right now. So many of our folks that are on payment plans will be able to qualify for this program. And so now it's really a lot of the work is on the utility to kind of provide the existing accounts and balances that are past due during those certain periods to get funding from the state that will apply as a bill credit. So we don't have those necessary, we didn't have those dates in the same way that other utilities did. I think if that answers your question.
Yeah, that cleared it up for me. So are we doing the survey, or is the CSD at the state doing the survey? And how can we be helpful in the outreach? Are we meeting what we expected in the way of understanding the arrearages in our own community?
Yeah, so right now our utility billing team is pulling together all of the numbers, and we're looking at that. We have a meeting to discuss it internally tomorrow, and we'll be filing that before the September 9th deadline. And so then my understanding is the state will kind of look at those, and then that's how they'll give each utility an allocation. So we'll be allocated a certain amount of funds. That way, because they're going to be approving these applications on a rolling basis, it wouldn't be that certain utilities would beat out others just because they got there first, for example. So our pot of money will be there to the extent that we need it.
This is a big lift.
Yeah.
Think about the
and
the diversity of our state and communicating to all the ratepayers out there.
Yes, it is.
In multiple languages, and trepidation about government programs, and So I don't have any other questions. But we will do the if any members of the public, the viewing public, would like to have any questions or comments on this, you can do that by calling 916-774-5353. And we'll wait a few minutes. We'll wait a few seconds. No phone calls. All right. Thank you, Amber, as always. Next up, Environmental Utilities Priority Legislation for August 2021. Noelle Maddock.
Good afternoon, Mayor Haldushout, Vice Mayor Haldushout. Sorry, I just promoted you.
Soon enough.
Councilmember Mendonça. This afternoon, I'm going to provide you an update on the implementation of the California Water and Wastewater Arrearages Payment Program and the Low-Income Household Assistance Program, and also share how the governor's recent emergency proclamation on energy that Amber just presented on is being addressed in environmental utilities. So the state has allocated $1.1 billion to address the arrearages issue for water and wastewater. That money is coming from the federal stimulus funds for these programs. I say CWAPP. So the CWAPP implementation overview. This is the program that's going to be administered by the State Water Resources Control Board. Unlike the other programs, this is not something that the State Water Board usually does. These types of programs typically go through the Community Services and Development Department. The arrears are being defined as the same as on the electric side, and that is the March 4th, 2020 to June 15th, 2021. And that actually should be AB 148 is the resources bill, so that was my error. But that bill provided the timeline and guidance to establish this program within the State Water Resources Control Board. It does place the wastewater as a second tier to water. So if there's funds available after everybody has completed their surveys and funds are allocated for the water side of the house, then the State Water Board will then move on and provide funding for the wastewater utilities. They have the State Water Board was given 90 days to survey the water agencies and adopt a resolution outlining the program guidelines. And they are to begin accepting applications within 14 days of adopting the resolution. And they have the same deadline to expend the funds as on the electric side, which is January 31st of 2022.
Is this coming out of the Division of Financial Assistance at State Water Board or? Okay. No. Sorry, I don't mean to. Didn't mean it for it to be a pop quiz. I was just.
No, it's actually.
Know who's heading this up?
It's actually running. Communications go through the SAFER program,
Okay. Got it.
and but it is running through the Division of Drinking Water.
Okay.
So,
Yep. Thank you.
all right. So much like on the electric side, it really is going in the 4 phases, where in phase 1, the water utilities will receive a survey questionnaire from the State Water Board. Phase 2 is the application that the utilities will submit. Phase 3 is when the water utility applies that benefit directly to our customers. And then in phase 4, we will be required to submit information to the State Water Board on how we allocated those funds and then return any funds that were unused. Going into phase 1, we are currently working with the billing department as well as our business services department in environmental utilities, because water is being treated a little bit differently, where if we do have revenue losses, that is something that we can recoup as well, whereas that's not an offer on the electric side in their program. The submission of our report is going to be done through the electronic annual report, which is really nice because a lot of the information that they're requesting is information that we do provide on an annual basis. So that is auto-populating. So that's saving us a little bit of time and effort. The information they're collecting is on both residential and commercial customers. Residential customers on our side of the house has been defined as customers who receive water service to a single family residence, multifamily residence, or mobile homes, including mobile homes and mobile parks or farm worker housing. So I'm not sure. I think there was some discrepancies between commercial and residential between the two programs. And then on the commercial side, commercial customers has been defined, and those include hotels, motels, restaurants, office buildings, government and military facilities, gas stations, hospitals, educational facilities and retail establishments, dormitories, nursing homes, churches, jails, prisons, mental health facilities, addiction recovery centers, campgrounds, and farm worker housing. It does not include landscape irrigation. So in a time of drought, that's a little important to point out. Moving on to phase 2, which is the application process. There was a webinar on.
I'm sorry, can I
Yeah.
say, you made the reference to landscape, and you want to ask the question? Because I think we probably have the same. Did you make that reference because most of residential water use is landscape? Is used in?
That was under the commercial part,
Okay.
and so it does include industrial, commercial and industrial, just wanting to make sure that our bills for our landscaping, we would not be able to claim funding for any arrearages that the city may have on their water.
Misassociated your comment with the residential side?
No, that isn't, that's not that has nothing to do with residential. They get a bill, it's not between landscaping or.
This is the medians that we water and
But isn't that partly purple pipe, the medians and things?
Those are recycled water, yeah.
Recycled water, so that wouldn't really apply. We wouldn't be seeking reimbursement, right? Because that's all recycled water, right?
So it would be if a commercial customer has landscaping that they are irrigating and they have a separate meter, they cannot seek reimbursement for that portion of their bill.
Got it.
Thanks for the clarification.
Sure. Sorry if I muddied it up.
You didn't. You did up
We
here. Right. You were clear. No mud, clear.
Okay. Thank you. So moving on to phase 2 is the application process. This is a little sparse, and you'll see in the next few slides. The State Water Resource Control Board is supposed to be releasing their draft program guidelines, which will detail the application process and the reporting requirements for us. I was hoping they were going to release it by today so I can include that information, but
And
I'm
another
thinking
release
probably
they
Friday.
And a release on curtailments. They had to get out of the way first, right?
Right. But on our call that we had last week with them, they have set a tentative date for the application being released on or about October 6th. And then there will be a 60-day window for utilities to apply, which is the same as on the electric side, and that will conclude on December 8th. So there's just a couple days difference between both of the programs for electric and water. Data needed for application. This is to be determined. Based on the information we have seen in the survey questions, we are anticipating the board to be asking for information such through an electronic spreadsheet that we can provide that would serve as evidence for past due billing dates that we're reporting for each account, any late fees that appear on a bill, and an account number, as well as the total debt for each account number. So it's going to be a little bit more detailed, and that's just based on the questions that were asked in the survey that we're in the process of reporting. So it'll be much more detailed is what we're anticipating. And then moving on to phase 3. In statute, the state board is to begin dispersing the funds by November 1st, 2020. And then we have heard that they will start dispersing as soon as they can on a rolling basis. They do have, in the next slide, they do have one priority that's been set, and that's for small community water systems. Within 60 days of receiving the funds, utilities are supposed to issue the assistance to the customers in the form of a bill credit. And on the CAPP side, they have to include a statement that the funding, they're receiving this credit based on the CAPP funding. That is yet to be determined. We're expecting that in the guidance document to be released. So the prioritization of funds, as I noted, the prioritization that was in statute is that state small systems will receive funding first. So they're going to prioritize getting that money out the door first.
Those are 5 to 15 connections? Is that somewhere in? Yeah.
It's right around that range, yeah. But it's important to note as well, in this process, the legislation was written that the state board can provide guidance. They cannot necessarily tell us how to distribute the funds as well. So there's going to be some very close watching to see what's in that guidance document to make sure it complies with what the legislation states. And then for the disconnection restrictions, this is where we're a little bit different. Disconnections cannot happen before September 30th. We must offer customers the option of a payment plan for any remaining unpaid charges. We cannot disconnect a customer for the non-payment until they do not respond to the offer of a repayment plan, or they have defaulted on their payment plan, whichever is later. Phase 4, to be determined.
Okay.
And then moving on to the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program.
Slide. At the next slide.
Thank you. This is going to actually be administered by the Community Services Development Department, the same as the CAPP program. This is an income-based program, which is 60% of the median household income, which is approximately $51,780 in Placer County. It would, if you use statewide median household income, it's a little bit less. It can be used to address pre-COVID arrearages, and the state is to receive approval from the federal government in December on their implementation plan, and they're to begin in late fall 2021 on dispersing those funds.
So you said December, you meant September, right?
Sorry, yes.
That's okay.
And the deadline
December, and you said September, so.
The deadline for the LIHWAP program is September 2023. So they're going to have multiple years to expend these funds over. And so this could potentially extend after the COVID relief funding, but it's all going to be dependent upon the funding that's available. And okay, sorry. So the disbursements of funds can either come from the local service providers or directly from the community services district. We have already set up for the low-income household heating program, the LIHEAP program, to have those direct payments come directly from CSD. So that is what we are going to be doing on the water side as well. And then for last time when I was here, I had made the comment there were a few questions that we had remaining. And in our call with CSD, we were able to get all of those questions resolved. One of the questions was the $1,000 that was going to be allocated for water and wastewater, was that for combined utility, both of those, or was it $1,000 each? It is $1,000 for combined, but all of our customers who do apply for the LIHWAP program or the LIHEAP program, they will be entered into both programs, and they can get up to $2,000 credit for all of those three services. So next, outstanding items. Yes, so as Amber mentioned, we're very likely to be coming to City Council to get authorization for the city manager or his designee to receive funds from the state, and to also be able to sign the required documents to participate in the program. And then the other issue that has popped up and that we're working on feverishly at the moment is the California Department of Finance is currently stating that we would have to provide our customers with 1099 tax forms if their benefits are greater than $599. So this doesn't seem congruent with the desire of that funding. And so we're working through our trade associations to get this rectified at the federal level, to have the Treasurer's Department determine that this funding really is not going to be taxable, which is in alignment with the funding for the rental assistance and all of the other. So we will definitely make sure that we let you know this is of importance, paramount importance to us, because we are automatically enrolling our customers in it. and they don't have that option to opt out, and we don't want to be handing them a 1099 letting them know that they now have to pay taxes on that money. So, finally, Amber talked about the proclamation for the state of emergency, and as a part of that proclamation, it was providing incentives to large users. So Environmental Utilities has reached out to our providers, Pacific Gas and Electric and Roseville Electric. Our water division has one plant that is within PG&E territory, and we're exploring entering into the emergency load reduction program, where we can earn up to $1,000 for each megawatt we shift our use to backup power. And then on the wastewater division, they're continuing their partnership with Roseville Electric to shed their load during these extreme heat events. Questions? And before I forget, you have a matrix put together by Amber and myself that has far more details than you probably really want, but it just shows how complex these programs are and all of the details that are going into it.
Councilmember Mendoza, any questions?
Nope. I appreciate the updates. This is really cool. I was reading this before we started the meeting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a,
I'm a paper guy. I know that's going to bother some people in the electronic age, but
it's carbon
yeah,
sequestration.
I like this.
This is a Herculean effort, I mean. Okay. I don't have any questions. Let's see if the public does by calling 916-774-5353. Okay. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is Mr. Walensky's priority legislation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Hoddeschild and Councilmember Mendoza. Once again, I'm Mark Walensky, the Government Relations Administrator, and my presentation today is an overview of state priority bills being tracked and federal funding being considered by Congress with a particular focus on transportation. The Public Works Department oversees and implements the demanding work that is crucial to improving the quality of life in Roseville. This work includes transportation improvements for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, optimizing traffic flow, and maintaining the city's transportation infrastructure. The department is also responsible for constructing capacity-enhancing projects, installing major traffic safety improvements, completing priority roadway maintenance, operating the city's bus system, building and maintaining an expansive system of bike trails and bike lanes, and managing an ever-growing fleet of fossil fuel and electric vehicles. The department accomplishes this by providing overall direction, coordination, and management of public works programs and services that oversee capital improvements and operations of key infrastructure such as roads, bridges, bikeways, and traffic systems. In addition, the department operates and maintains the city's transit system, provides maintenance for over 1,100 lane miles of city streets, and operates and maintains 200 traffic signals. There are many challenges the department continues to grapple with to meet the growing demands placed on the Public Works Department and the successful maintenance and operations of the transportation network. These include lack of state and federal funding for transportation projects and rehabilitation, new state and federal mandates for zero-emission vehicles, climate adoption mandates, along with a seemingly never-ending series of new mandates which add to the increasing challenges the department faces in keeping the city's streets and roads in good repair while meeting the new requirements of climate change and other policy mandates. The following is an overview of some of the state transportation legislation that is still active, an overview of transportation governance, and federal funding being considered by Congress that has potential implications to the department and how it meets its transportation-related goals and objectives. With respect to state transportation legislation, Assembly Bill 122, the city has taken an oppose unless amended position on this bill. The bill would allow bicycles to treat stop signs as yield signs when there are no vehicles present. this bill would legalize what bicyclists currently do today. While staff doesn't have concerns with this approach on residential or collector streets, staff does have concerns on this approach when entering a stop from a residential collector onto an arterial. Even if the bicyclist can manage to cross or join traffic, there are examples of when a vehicle is driving on an arterial and a bike comes out of a side street very quickly, it will cause the car to swerve. This becomes a problem particularly if there's a car next to the vehicle that swerves. AB 1035, the city is watching this bill to understand the final definition of department standard specification, which appears to include any future specifications for recycled materials that are published in Caltrans standard specifications. However, we're concerned that this would require ongoing updates to local specifications whenever Caltrans updates their specifications, thereby creating ongoing costs for local governments to review Caltrans specifications, determine their feasibility and cost effectiveness for local projects, and, if feasible and cost effective, to formally adopt the specifications. And then finally, Senate Bill 372. The city has taken a watch position on this bill to understand if it might provide any specified program components, financing tools, and non-financial support that might be beneficial to the city as it considers future conversion of certain portions of the city's fleet. With respect to transportation governance, one of the components that lends to the complexity of transportation matters is governance. Transportation governance involves a variety of federal, state, regional, and local agencies, including how funding is allocated to states and local governments. The federal government mainly provides funding and oversees certain safety requirements. Congress appropriates federal funding for transportation and establishes national transportation policy objectives. The main federal agency tasked with carrying out Congress's directives is the Department of Transportation. The state, regional, and local governments help fund, plan, construct, operate, and maintain different transportation infrastructure such as highways, streets, and roads, transit systems, and intercity rail. And in California, the legislature sets the state's overall transportation policies, including establishing state revenue sources and expenditure priorities. The legislature typically appropriates a lump sum in the Annual Budget Act for different types of transportation projects, while delegating the authority to select specific projects to various state entities and local governments. The main state transportation department is California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, which owns, operates, maintains, and repairs the state highway system. Continuing with transportation governance, the California Transportation Commission reviews and adopts the major transportation project list proposed by Caltrans and regional agencies and oversees project delivery. In addition, the state passes through certain federal and state funds to regional and local agencies. Regionally, there are two main types of transportation governing bodies that perform planning activities. First, the state has 18 Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPOs, that are federally required planning bodies for every urbanized area in the state with a population over 50,000. Second, the state has 26 regional transportation planning agencies, or RTPAs, and these perform functions similar to the MPOs but are located in rural areas of the state. And finally, the local governance for transportation is found within California's 58 counties and 482 cities who own, maintain, and provide funding for the local streets and roads in their jurisdictions. Cities and counties set land use policies, nominate transportation projects for funding by their regional governing body, and enforce traffic laws in their communities. Some counties also have transportation authorities that are responsible for developing expenditure plans for voter-approved local sales tax measures. And with respect to federal infrastructure, The Senate recently passed the massive $1.2 trillion Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, as Amber had shared with you earlier, which includes a full surface transportation reauthorization bill, in addition for funding for the electric grid, broadband, water infrastructure, resiliency, and western water storage, environmental remediation, and more. The bipartisan deal focuses almost entirely on physical infrastructure projects that will move to rebuild parts of America's society and take action on longer-term issues from climate change to improving internet access. The following areas would get major new spending. Transportation projects, the bill would spend $110 billion in new funds for road, bridges, and related projects. Reconnected communities. In the past few decades of road construction, many American cities have been physically divided by large highways, disproportionately affecting minority communities. This bill would spend $1 billion to reconnect many of these places. High-speed internet. The bill would spend $65 billion with a goal of providing broadband internet to all Americans, further aiming to boost competition among providers and reduce the cost of high-speed internet to make it more affordable. And then other action on climate change. The bill would also make several other investments meant to combat climate change. While the plan is the largest ever proposed, it is a step down in some ways from what had been proposed by the administration. For one example, public transit funds were cut by roughly $10 billion. Continuing with federal infrastructure, as Amber mentioned, yesterday afternoon, the House passed the budget resolution that starts the process of putting together the pieces of the $3.5 trillion human infrastructure bill. And it is expected that this bill will pass the House before the Senate-passed infrastructure bill, which is slated for a vote on September 27th. It should be noted that what Speaker Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Schumer had anticipated was bringing this together as one massive package. So the budget resolution, the $3.5 trillion human infrastructure bill, and then the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, they were looking to bring that all together. But there were challenges, and also, as Amber noted, the negotiations and discussions are very fragile, but they're continuing to move forward, and so we'll continue to provide this committee with an update as this continues to unfold. So the two bills, though, are important to the Public Works Department and its transportation-related work. While much of the federal dollars are geared more towards large projects on the federal highway network and not local roads, the bills will provide for reauthorization of formula-based programs like the Regional Surface Transportation Program that is frequently used to resurface the city's major roadways, and congestion mitigation air quality grants that are used for projects like roundabouts, sidewalks, and bicycle facilities. The bills will also provide some competitive grant opportunities for bike facilities, pedestrian improvements, bus and fleet electrification, and nearly $85 billion nationwide for electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. While the infusion of funding is certainly welcome, it will not eliminate the funding challenges the department faces to meet the demands of maintaining, improving, and constructing new elements of the local transportation infrastructure.
Can you stop right there?
Sure.
Say that again.
So while the infusion
Say
of
the last part about local transportation infrastructure.
it will not eliminate the funding
Yeah, I know that.
challenges the department faces to meet the demands of maintaining, improving, and constructing new elements of the local transportation
And I
infrastructure.
think that's, and any financing is complicated. But we have two federal highways, 65 and 80. But we have local needs. So the sales tax takes care of what you just said.
Correct,
I mean, the gas tax takes care of what you just said,
correct,
but not the other.
right.
And that's, somehow we have to, it's a long process to help people understand that.
A long process and a very, as stated, multi-layered, and
Yeah.
that has, and the other component to it is that that I didn't highlight, but a great deal of it is based on formula.
Right.
And so it's not that there is a straight line from the federal government once the funding is allocated to the state and then state to local governments. Much of that funding that ultimately makes its way down to the local government is based on formulas. And so it oftentimes is reduced dramatically what we would actually receive at the local level.
So when they redid Washington Boulevard, that was with SB1 gas tax, was a local funding source, right? When they,
Are you talking about Andorra?
sorry, Jason. Yeah, no, when they did the new type of concrete on Washington and all of that, right?
So I'm going to invite Jason
Yes.
Tchaikovsky, the
Wasn't that the
Public Works
recycled
Director, up
tires and the
to answer
combination?
that specific question.
But
Yeah, so the concrete on Andorra was funded primarily with gas tax, some highway user tax funds, which are the new state gas tax. We had some other money mixed in there because we added a second southbound lane on Washington, so there's some traffic mitigation fees in there. But it was primarily gas tax funds, yes.
and then our road resurfacing that's taking place now, same source of funding.
So generally, our largest source of funding is state gas tax and SB1 money. However, on the arterial project, there is a federal gas tax you pay at the pump. And through the formula process, we did receive some money for that. So we're getting about $7 million for the arterial resurfacing that's currently going on.
When you go to build and widen a road and add lanes to it, we go back to what Mark's talking about in the federal level, right?
Actually, federal funds is one of the challenges. There's this big talk about trillions of dollars of federal money coming out from the Biden administration. The challenge is not much of that's going to make it to the local level for transportation projects. The feds are looking at large projects, state highway stuff. We may get some for maybe 65 or I-80, but our local roads, that's not really what they're interested in funding. We get a little bit of money through formula funding, like CMAQ grants, congestion mitigation grants, maybe alternative transportation grants like ATP, and we might get some through the federal gas tax for maybe maintaining a little more arterials. But we're not going to see the large, giant sums of money that we need to build some of our projects.
But our sales, our California gas tax goes to road resurfacing and transit and some of those things that people go, God, I wish they'd fix this road. Right?
Correct.
That's the gas tax.
We use almost all of our gas tax and SB1 money for resurfacing. Yeah, that's our primary source of funding for resurfacing. Otherwise, it would have to come from the general fund.
Thank you, Jason. Mr. Walensky, thanks for letting me interrupt your presentation.
Absolutely. Anytime. There may be, as Jason just said, there may be other funding opportunities that will occur. There may be other funding opportunities that will occur once the final legislation is passed and signed by the president, which will ultimately require a deep review and analysis of the final legislation to fully understand how the funding can be used to support the department's transportation goals and objectives. So in conclusion, government relations staff will continue to work closely with the department to understand the implications and opportunities that exist from the funding that becomes available from the federal government, and will provide the committee with an update on these items as the congressional and legislative sessions continue to progress. In addition, staff will bring the updated list, priority list to the L&R committee for their input and comments on any of the bills that are passed by the legislature and make their way to the governor's desk for his consent. And this concludes my presentation, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Former Transportation Commissioner Mendoza, do you have any questions?
I don't have any specific questions. It's good to see a lot of this stuff moving through. I think it's going to be a busy 24 months. But I did have one question. I'm assuming that we've got something in place, and you don't have to answer this at this meeting, but I saw in the third or fourth slide from the conclusion slide where we were talking about having to meet the needs of the electric cars and the requirements for those electrified fleet. So those requirements for us to meet those needs don't contradict the other, and I forgot the bill's number, forgive me, a couple meetings ago where it broke out the requirement of how we had to start transitioning our fleet to more of an electronic type fleet. So we're not going to be required to get the fleet in place before we have the infrastructure to charge the fleet, right? Someone's thought of that? I mean, it's not unlike government, to put the cart before the horse, so I just thought I would ask.
That's not completely true. The infrastructure is lagging behind where policy is at this point,
Okay.
and where the requirements are. And we saw in, I believe it's in the infrastructure bill, billions of dollars to put in electric infrastructure, because there's a recognition that while there's this strong demand for the electrification of the fleet, particularly for privately owned vehicles, the charging infrastructure is not in place. And so there is that march toward having, by date certain levels of electrification take place. Currently, right now, the infrastructure isn't there necessarily to meet that demand.
Okay. I was just curious because, I mean, it's been brought up, and I'm like, well, I would think at some point we're going to sink this, right? We would hope.
We would hope that would be true, but to your comment, it's not uncommon to see that policy, one portion of a policy be out in front of another portion of the policy and waiting for those to sync up.
And we wouldn't be the only, city that would have those challenges either. I mean, this is a bill that covers the state. So I was just curious if that had come up in conversation, or if someone were like, well, wait a minute, we gotta back this up a little bit and let this one catch up, kind of a thing, so that the implementation is somewhat simultaneous. But if not, I mean, it was more of a comment observation than it was a direct question, because I understand that somehow that's not an easy answer. So thank you.
Well, the other piece to that I might add is that there still is a lag behind in the manufacturing, in the technology, and some of the batteries and that type of technology that's part of that's required for this as well.
Makes sense.
And so there's a number of different elements to it, or different layers to it, that at this point aren't synced up.
Okay. Cool.
That's an important question you asked.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mendoza. So,
Great presentation, as
yeah,
always.
no, yeah. All right, we'll see if the public has any questions by calling 916-774-5353. I don't hear the phone ring, so I think we've come to the end of our business for today. One more time, I'll offer public comment for non-agenda items for the general good of the order. Wait a few seconds to see if the phone rings. And it doesn't. Any concluding comments?
Nope. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'd love to explore, not right now, but how we might provide outreach and information in a way to our businesses and our citizens about the great work that you're doing. I mean, as I watched your PowerPoints, I was thinking of how many versions of that PowerPoint you must have had to put together because of the evolving landscape and the fluidity, especially at the end of, at the end of in August of any year. So, I don't know. Just think about how we can, in consumable bites, in a way that doesn't sound like pure drudgery to the, doesn't sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, right? We can help, because the work you're doing, and I've said it before, is incredibly valuable to our community. And how we get that out. And then, I've asked this question before, I forget the answer, so forgive me. We have a Transportation Commission. Do you give them a little report that they can read, not an update like you give us? And in our public utilities, do you give them, sort of a dashboard of legislation and things like that? You know, I mean, not to the depth in which you give us, but, right?
And I know that to the Public Utility Committee,
Commission.
that report out is provided. We haven't been asked on any type of regular basis to provide the transportation, maybe that same kind of information.
All right. If there's nothing else, I'm going to move to adjourn. We'll see you.
Was there nothing?